Tonight on the channel, we talk about fixing IDPA. Are you ready? Stand by. Welcome back to the Humble Marksman channel. I'm David and I'll be your guide in pursuit of practical pistol proficiency. Today on the channel, it's going to be a little bit different from what we normally do. This is going to be more of like a podcast style video where you can just kind of let it play in the background, drive to work, load some ammo, do yard work, whatever you want to do. There's not going to be a bunch of stunning visuals, so if that's what you're here for, you might as well check out. Second, I am more interested in a dialogue and productive conversation on how to improve, specifically in this video, IDPA, and I will be addressing USPSA and its issues in a separate video. So I know that some of you have already started furiously typing, getting ready to tell me that if I don't like IDPA, I shouldn't play it, and it's just a game, you play by the rules that you're given, and all of those other things. Just like Glock pistols, things aren't always perfect as they come. So we're going to talk about some ideas that I think most people will be able to get behind, and if you hear what I have to say, maybe engage in the comments with refuting what I want to say or potentially offering up your own changes for the game. Regardless of how you feel about it, the goal is not to tear down IDPA. If you get really honest about you USPSA guys, a lot of you come from IDPA, myself included. So I think it really behooves everybody to have both IDPA and USPSA be as strong as possible. So the goal with this video is actually to improve the sport and get a game that can function as well as it can. Now, as far as background is concerned, I actually started in IDPA. I founded an IDPA club that is still active to this day, and I served for a couple years as a match director. I then fell in love with USPSA, turned my back on IDPA, and only recently have restarted my membership. And before we go any further, if you want to support the channel, check out the links in the description. I've got a Patreon where $1 gets you access to 3 to 5 posts per week. And I've got a link to Big Daddy Unlimited where $1 gets your first month bought, where you'll get access to wholesale pricing on Second Amendment type stuff. And most importantly, I need you to like and comment. Do both of those things. That makes the algorithm gods happy. So before we dive in, a lot of the reasoning for this is the fact that there is a D in IDPA and the game is intended to be a defensive type game, whereas USPSA is more of like a pure sport game. So a lot of the justification for why the rules are the way they are should fall back to that defensive mindset as far as how the rules are created. Problem with that is this rule book was written in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it did a good job of chronicling at the time what was sort of the prevailing wisdom in defensive pistol use. I don't think it's a big surprise to say that the ball has moved down the field since then, and the things that we were doing in the 90s as good ideas have been improved upon, and the way we're shooting pistols now is generally a lot better than what it was in the 90s and early 2000s. So the rules should have a dynamic element to them to at least keep up with the times in some regard. So along those lines, the lowest hanging fruit in my mind, and probably the easiest to change, is going to be allowing speed reloads. Since IDPA rulebook became a thing, the global war on terror started, and we learned a lot about small arms gunfighting. And I've never met anybody more upset by the reload with retention rule than people who've been in actual combat or are actual law enforcement officers. Running out of ammunition is its own penalty within the game. There is no need for a game mechanic that further punishes the reload with retention. It does not bring meaningful balance to the game. It just creates sort of an esoteric motion, which is a dynamic administrative reload, which basically isn't practiced I think by anybody at this point. Now, it would get rid of some of the emergency reloads, but I'm not sure that that's really going to affect the game mechanics, since people are just round dumping and reloading from slide lock as they run to the next position largely. But allowing it and allowing partially spent magazines to be on the ground is if you accidentally dislodge your magazine from your mag pouch and you're not aware of it, you won't stack up a bunch of penalties. So there's probably a lot of good reasons why speed loads or allowing ammunition to be in magazines on the ground is a good idea for the game. The next is relaxing the stage design guidelines. I don't know if you're unfamiliar with IDPA, you're probably not even aware that 70% of the targets have to be at 15 yards and in, and the maximum engagement distance for a target in a scenario style stage is 20 yards. Not everybody is shooting on indoor bays, and I don't think you're necessarily punishing anyone by allowing 25, 30-yard stages in scenario type stages. It just adds some more variety. The scoring model, being what it is so punitive that if you're inaccurate on those targets, it's its own penalty anyway. What having those stage design parameters has done at all of the clubs that have shot IDPA largely is it's moved all the targets way in. While 15 yards is allowed, generally targets like to live at about 10 yards and in, so there's not as much variety in the stages. The shooting is very simple in a lot of cases. And I think if you allowed and encouraged stage design to kind of grow and really test the limits of the shooters, there would be more of a natural stratification amongst the shooters due to this time plus model not really stratifying shooters as far as their skills are concerned. So that would put a bigger premium on accuracy, which is a stated goal of the administration who runs IDPA, as well as providing more varied shooting challenges for the shooters. IDPA does have a lot of divisional bloat. Specifically, there is the backup gun category, which back in the day kind of made sense, but then they introduced compact carried pistol, and nobody really competitively shoots in bug. I think if you just rolled it up under CCP, which also is not very well attended since kind of the mainline classic divisions of SSP and ESP and now carry optics are sort of dominating the roost. If you rolled up bug into CCP, nobody would notice, and the only people who would cry about it are the ones trying to go trophy hunting at major matches where nobody else is shooting backup gun. Some of you right now, I can just feel it, are licking your chops waiting for me to talk about the capacity and changing the capacity of the magazines and upping the round count for the stages. No, I actually agree with what IDPA has done and the line they've carved in the sand with respect to their mag limits and both the round count, because with a 10-round magazine and requiring a minimum of 12-round scenario stages, you're forcing one reload per stage, so everybody's got to manage a reload. And with 18 rounds, you're really kind of limiting the ammo expenditure for new shooters, and it's a stated goal of IDPA to be accessible to just about anybody. And I think keeping the round counts down helps keep the game accessible, because I can remember when I first started shooting, figuring out how I was going to buy ammo was one of the major concerns and kind of governed my participation in the game. So I actually agree with what they've done with the 18 rounds. I could see potentially raising it to 20, because then you could force 2 reload stages for SSP and ESP and carry optics. So maybe raise the round count per stage to 20 from a game mechanics perspective. I think that could create some pretty interesting stages. And here is my most disruptive, and you probably guessed this was coming, since the reason I stopped shooting IDPA in the first place was the more or less unilateral decision for them to increase the penalty per point to 1 second per point down as opposed to ½ second per point down. What I'm suggesting is the following, and I think it can make the IDPA crowd happy, as well as the people who think speed should play a more major role in the game. Go back to a ½ second per point down. However, change the center 0 to be slightly smaller by maybe taking it 1 inch in diameter, and then increase the penalty for the -3 zone. Make it like -8. Everybody talks about deltas and -3s as more or less lucky mics, and making it a -8 would be a 4-second penalty, whereas a miss on the target is a 5-second penalty. So you'd still be punishing marksmanship that was less than stellar. However, you wouldn't be penalizing what are generally considered to be good hits. If you look at like the FBI Q target, you'll notice the scoring area for maximum points is significantly larger than the IDPA 0 zone. And from a game mechanic standpoint, specifically like level 2 matches where there are a lot of movers, a lot of these movers get made in such a way that they're very difficult to zero out. So a skill that is very sort of unreachable by the masses is not going to necessarily punish the newer guys who are shooting their first major, since not everybody gets to practice on swingers and clamshells and sliders and all those other targets that are all over the IDPA stages. And another benefit to a ½ second per point down is sort of parity with carry optics. The iron sight guys, I realize high overall isn't a thing, but it sort of is at the club level, and going to a half second per point down is going to make the iron sight guys like their guns aren't totally obsolete, which they are. And a lot of the rule changes in the past have been made in order to make people who buy expensive 1911s feel better about their large equipment purchase, so why not throw a bone to the guys in SSP and ESP? The next item that is more disruptive, I think a lot of people could probably get on board with, and it would also maybe require adding a new division, but that would be the changing of ESP to be materially different from SSP. If you look at the 5x5 classifier times, there's basically no difference between ESP and SSP. Considering both guns are shooting basically the same ammo, the biggest change is going to be realized in a magwell, effectively. Like, you might get a little bit faster, more consistent reload, but the triggers on basically all the guns can be worked over to where a single action trigger isn't a huge advantage, and they're using the same sights. So make ESP something totally different. Allow the use of weapon mounted lights, allow the use of magwells, all kinds of crazy slide cuts, lasers if they want to use lasers, because that's probably a better home for a laser than, say, IDPA carry optics. Let's be serious, nobody who's using a red dot is using a laser, because that'd just be crazy. I also think that you should allow the use of carry compensators, and you can't say, oh, there's no defensive use case for it. Well, yes, you can, because Staccato sells a gun with a compensator that is made specifically for duty, and Bull Armory does the same thing. And there have been multiple manufacturers making ported barrels on their guns for a while now. There's the 19C, and the M&P for forever has had those ports on the barrel, and those types of guns would now have a home to play in the new ESP, and you could make a carry optics equivalent of this division. I don't know what you'd call it, the Roland division, whatever you want to call it, doesn't really matter, but just allowing that style of gun to compete. And at that point, you would have a gun that is appreciably different from a stock service pistol and allowing it to compete. So that might be more interesting, and it would certainly be more inclusive for the guys who like to make Gucci Glocks. And by calling it like ESP or enhanced carry optics, there will be a gear race to a limited extent, which isn't a bad thing. It makes the manufacturers happy, but it's going to be constrained to sort of that division. So you'd have basically your plain Jane irons division, you'd have your plain Jane optic division, and then you would have the enhanced version of the same, where they've got all the go fast stuff. And there is a use case increasingly for carry comps, so I think that that could be interesting and give people something interesting to play with. And this is going to bring us on to sort of some of the philosophical changes. But before we do that, we need to honor the sacred relationship between I, the content creator, and you, the subscriber. And now's a great time to subscribe if you haven't done so. Oh, and you remembered to like and comment, right? Well, I make world-class firearms content, and you watch this content. As you watch it, you think about your IDPA concealment garment, and you decide you're going to up your game with a leather trench coat with my logo on the back. So when you're at the gas station after the match and everybody silently judges you, they'll know of the world-class firearms content here on the channel. So the defensive argument is used by the organization when it makes its changes, like saying 1 second per point down, and you can certainly articulate a reason why that is there, although from a game mechanics standpoint, it sort of breaks the game, and it really didn't do anything to make the fast guys slow down, because they just aim a little bit harder and are still generally the most accurate people in the match. And while the 90s and 2000s era action movies were super awesome, that's not what defensive carry is all about. Now, nobody wears a fishing vest out in public, and nobody uses a blade tech or comp tack outside the waistband holster to actually daily concealed carry, and the whole name of the game is using actual concealed carry gear. However, a method of carry that is pretty much the norm for people who are practicing defensive carry at this point is appendix carry, and I understand that there is some hesitancy by the people at IDPA to allow this style of carry. In fact, it's excluded specifically in their rulebook under Rule 8.5.1 with cross draw and small of back and other dodgy types of carry. So it's basically lumped in with some defunct modes of carry, despite being the method of carry that most of the high-speed defensive trainers at this point are recommending for a number of reasons, chief of which being weapons retention is superior with Appendix carry. So my recommendation is to allow Appendix carry with a caveat, at least initially. And concerns about insurance, I'm sure, are part of their driving concern. In USPSA, you can actually use Appendix carry holsters in both open and limited divisions. It's not super popular, but there are guys who do it. And that's not important to say we got to do it because USPSA does it. It's important to say, well, USPSA is able to purchase insurance and allowing this type of holster carry, so IDPA can purchase this type of insurance allowing this type of holster carry. But because leadership at IDPA is generally people who are retired from their careers and getting up in their years, they're sort of detached from what is actually happening on the ground with defensive carry trainers. But I am offering an olive branch. If you allow Appendix carry, but only allow it for firearms who have some sort of mechanism to prevent a negligent discharge upon holstering, because let's be honest, that's what they're concerned about, is somebody's going to shoot themselves in the femoral artery when holstering, although Appendix carriers are generally a pretty self-selecting crowd and take holstering very, very seriously due to the area the gun is living in. By allowing guns with manual safeties or double single guns that you can hammer check, like XDMs, which have a grip safety, you can holster with your finger off the grip safety, Glocks with the striker control device, or any other type of modification that prevents the trigger from traveling to the rear, to be used in Appendix carry. From a game mechanics perspective, the Appendix carriers could conceal with just a regular t-shirt. They'd be gaining 1 to 2 tenths on the draw versus the vest strong side type draw stroke. However, they would be giving it right back on the reloads because reloading from concealment with a t-shirt is 2 to 3 tenths slower. So you'd have to be a total stud at reloading, and because of the round count in IDPA, especially if you raised it to 20 rounds, all of a sudden it has equalized itself with the vest type carry. So guys could roll to the match and actually compete with the guns they carry as they carry them, which I think is the whole point of a sport called the International Defensive Pistol Association. And in that same vein, talking about leadership getting sort of advanced in the years, a lot of the rule books in the past have been rejected by the membership at large because it's just like they don't fully understand how the game is played on a deep level. There's nobody at headquarters who shoots at like a master level and understands when it's acceptable to maybe leave 2 downs on a target rather than standing and waiting for the swinger to reappear. People who understand it on a super deep level and really get the game mechanics, they need to be the ones who are making game mechanic decisions. If the old guard wants to just be administrators, then that's fine, but let's call a spade. You don't understand the game on a deep enough level to improve it. Allow guys like Mike Seeklander or BJ Norris, or guys who have competed in IDPA forever and are at the top of the game, bring them on as consultants, maybe keep them even on staff, to kind of guard the rule book as you roll through these types of revisions. It's not an insult to say that you don't know what you don't know and call in experts. So the people who are beating your game and using the rules as a weapon and skirting your intent with the rules, that's who you want making the changes to the rules. You don't want somebody who seldom competes and just goes to matches effectively to yell at people to be the one changing the rules. And in that same vein, this is a pistol competition. So sit back and let me regale you with a story of a young man named Elias Frangoulis who won custom defensive pistol, I think it was 2018. He was the national champion. He also won the world shoot in classic division that year in IPSC. So he started a career as a firearms instructor and trainer. He didn't have as much time to compete. He only got out to a handful of majors, and as the sitting national champion in IDPA, couldn't get a slot to the national championships to defend his title in IDPA. This is insanity. The current system basically rewards mediocre participation. If you just go to a lot of level 2s, guess what? You get to go to nationals. It doesn't matter that you're a career novice, because ultimately the IDPA national champion in each division does reflect on the organization of IDPA. So it is in IDPA's best interest to have the very best shooters be their national champions. If you get guys who are coming out and winning the IDPA national champion because it's the only game they play, but all of a sudden they go shoot USPSA's national championship and get absolutely smoked and don't finish in the top 20, then there's kind of a problem and it doesn't reflect well on the sport. So my fix for this is pretty simple. If you win your division at a major match, it's not just 1 point toward nationals, let it be 3 points toward nationals, or maybe even 4 points toward nationals. And if you come in second, maybe allow that to be 2 or 3 points towards nationals, so that the guys who are going to the major matches and winning can get national slots. And further, if you are a sitting national champion, not only should you be given a slot to next year's championship, it should be free. You should comp that person's trip. In fact, you should give them a stipend to get them to come shoot your match. Bob Vogel stopped competing in IDPA not because he stopped shooting, although he did stop shooting later, but because it didn't make sense for him financially to go play at IDPA. He had already established his name and he wasn't getting any money from winning the competition. So why would he spend money to go get basically a meaningless title to him? By incentivizing the absolute very best shooters to come play your sport by giving them preferred admission into the match, if nothing else, is going to do nothing but create better IDPA national champions and increase the caliber of competition. So when people come to these matches, they get to shoot against their heroes, and that's cool on a totally different level. So that's what I've got for you guys. And if you're still watching, then YouTube thinks you'll really enjoy this video up here, and I have randomly picked this video right below it, so maybe check that one out. As always, I appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.